Hey, welcome back. Eric Arnold again here in the Politics Barn. Oh, it's the 16th of August. What is it? Wednesday? Here, a steamy Wednesday afternoon here in Pennsylvania. Ivermectin. We're going to talk about ivermectin. And this is likely to be a long episode. I apologize in advance to you, subscriber X. It's an incredibly important episode. Now I know I haven't made a video in like months, and now all of a sudden I'm just rolling them out one right after the other. Well, a couple reasons for that. I have a microphone that works, so I want to talk. And there's a lot of very important things going on right now. Things that have never happened in the history of this country. The Donald Trump indictment. Number 4, as the criminal Marxists do everything in their power to cancel elections, or at least cancel the randomness of the elections and simply make sure that we elect the people that they approve of. But that's not the topic of this video. We'll probably do another one right on top of it in the next day or two about the Trump indictments. But I want to talk about ivermectin. Now you're saying, why that? Who cares? COVID's over. It doesn't matter anymore. There was a piece here in ZeroHedge just, I believe, today. And I knew this came out, and I thought, that's incredibly important. And someone here on ZeroHedge has distilled what I wanted to talk about into an article, which is great, because rather than me have to kind of put an episode together point by point, I can just basically read you what this man has put together. He calls himself QTR's Fringe Finance. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what ZeroHedge is, really a lot of the internet. People post on the internet all the time and don't use their real names. They use pseudonyms, handles. They're anonymous, I guess, if you will. I guess if you really fight hard, you could figure out who these people are. For example, a lot of people posted ZeroHedge under the handle Tyler Durden. Tyler Durden, the famous lead character from Fight Club, the movie from the late 90s, starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton. I don't know that there's one Tyler. I think there's multiple people that post as Tyler, but the point is they're anonymous. Now, I've chosen not to be anonymous. Some people do that. They just tell you what they think, and they say, here I am, come get me, tyrants of the United States. And I'm sure at some point they will, if I keep running my mouth. But I just can't help myself, because what's going on right now is wrong. So let's go to this article by QTR Fringe Finance about ivermectin. Now, the genesis of this, and it starts right off, it says, this month, lawyers from the Food and Drug Administration admitted in U.S. court that doctors, quote, do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID, unquote. An admission that stands at stark odds with a multiple-year campaign to misinform, misalign, and tarnish the reputation of one of the world's most successful drugs, which could have been used to save hundreds of thousands of lives during the pandemic. I couldn't have said it better myself. And now, why is this in court? Well, I think what's happening is a number of these doctors who wanted to prescribe ivermectin and were told by the Food and Drug Administration they couldn't, or their employers that they couldn't because the Food and Drug Administration wouldn't acknowledge the fact that it is a useful drug, so the hospital said you can't do it and fired these doctors. They're suing. They're suing, I don't know, I would sue everybody, and apparently one of the people they're suing is the FDA. So these lawsuits are now in court, and one of the lawyers is asking the lawyers from the FDA, well, what about ivermectin? And they admitted in the United States court, I'm going to read it again, that doctors, quote, do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID, unquote. That is a huge massive departure from the narrative, from what the government has said from the outset of this damn pandemic. So let's go on from here now. Yeah, and this is what he talks about, the lies, and you know, that's why I'm making this video. This video pales in, or is much more important, say, than the Hunter Joe videos, in that they're both along the same vein. In other words, I'm trying to show you independents out there that you're being routinely lied to, that where you go for information is usually a lie. Now, they've lied about Hunter's businesses and Joe's involvement in the businesses. I've showed you that. Where I'm showing you now is more lies. So the billionaires and the media that run this country are routinely lying to you. I could think of no better indoctrination than the travesty of a fraud that was just perpetrated on the American people regarding ivermectin. And he goes on. For those who haven't followed the story, during the course of the COVID pandemic, it was revealed that ivermectin, a drug that's been administered billions of times to humans and is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, was found in numerous clinical trials to have efficacy, that means it works, in early treatment of COVID-19. And if you're looking for a primer on this, he has a link to basically his footnotes, his sources showing, yes, it does work. I'm sure it's a very extensive website that aggregates all the clinical trials. And here's a discussion with Brett Weinstein and Dr. Pierre Corey that serves as a great introduction to the topic. So he's bringing his receipts showing, yep, ivermectin works. Here he's got a chart. Ivermectin for COVID-19, 99 studies from 1,089 scientists, 137,255 patients in 28 countries, and it basically shows that there is a definite link between the drug and you getting better from COVID-19. A significant link. It works. If you've been at least semi-conscious over the last 2 years, you've noticed that the early means of treating COVID outside of the vaccines, vitamin D, hydrochloroquine, ivermectin, were routinely shunned by the science, and then by proxy, the useful idiots in the mainstream media. You know it. If you don't remember it, I mean, you certainly should. I remember it, where if you even mentioned that you were taking hydrochloroquine, you probably were kicked off of YouTube. If you mentioned you were going to use ivermectin, you definitely were kicked off of YouTube. You simply weren't allowed to even mention these kind of cheap alternative treatments to COVID-19. Now, onward. Out of all the early treatments, ivermectin got the shortest end of the stick. Not only was it likely the most efficacious, probably means the one that worked the best. Of all the early treatments, it was also routinely subject to bastardization and a berating by the media. The disinformation campaign against ivermectin, spearheaded by the mainstream media, brought to you by Pfizer, reached its fever pitch when the media and the government agencies alike appeared to knowingly and maliciously juxtapose the human dosage of the drug with the coincidental and mostly unrelated fact that it was also used in a veterinarian dosage to deworm horses. So the fact that ivermectin can be used multiple ways, it can also be used on animals, I guess horses, if nothing else. Well, that makes it, of course, then you can't use it for humans, despite the fact that the rest of the world has been using it in human doses for many years, successfully. Rather than distinguish one ivermectin use from the other, clearly these bad actors instead willingly chose to perpetuate the brazen lie that ivermectin was only horse medicine, as I just mentioned, nonsense. But they did it. The media fostered this lie because their sponsorship and advertising revenue depended on it. The lie was then used as a weapon against anyone who discussed the legitimate usage of the human drug and its storied history of success. The most noxious example of media dishonesty came from the coverage of Joe Rogan. Do we remember that? Joe Rogan, we know who he is, right? The most listened to podcaster in the world, I guess, certainly in the United States. Joe Rogan, who took Ivermectin after getting COVID. Now here he goes ahead and does something that I'm going to say it's probably true, but he's saying CNN altered footage of Joe Rogan. In other words, they just adjusted the color a little bit on a picture of Rogan's podcast where he's, doing a selfie of himself saying, I'm taking ivermectin and, I hope it works. And they adjusted the color to make him look sick. It's like, they probably did it. This is CNN. I mean, they're liars. This is the point I'm trying to get through to you people. They lie, they lie, they lie, they lie. They've been caught lying hundreds of times. This is just one of them, maybe one of the most important ones, and yet you still watch the channel. My God, why? Why? Do you like being lied to? Seriously, do you enjoy being lied to? But onward, we'll skip past the altering of the video. Okay, now, Rogan responding to the coverage by CNN where they're laughing at him and saying he's taking horse medicine. Rogan said in 2021, now this happened in 2021. Remember, the attack on hydrochloroquine and ivermectin, that went on from almost the outset in the spring of 20. So this had already been going on for a year here, that the media had been established, the media, the FDA, the Democrats, they were the ones that were perpetuating these lies. These are the ones that are pushing these lies. When I say the media, I mean, that is media equals Marxist Democrats. I'm redundant there. I'm redundant. Democrat is really I could just put the equals here and say media equals Marxist equals Democrats. But, that's, you vote Democrat, you're a Marxist. Sorry, you are. And that's nothing to be proud of for you people that don't know what a Marxist is. But at any rate, Rogan responds in 2021, quote, they're making shit up. They keep saying I'm taking horse dewormer. I literally got it from a doctor. It's an American company. They won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for use in human beings, and CNN is saying I'm taking horse dewormer. They must know that's a lie. He further goes on. If the internet says it, who cares? But it's CNN is saying it. Jim Acosta. CNN was saying I'm the distributor of misinformation. I don't know what's going on, man. There's a lot of speculation. One of the speculations involves the emergency use authorization for vaccines. Now, this is important. That in order for there to be an emergency use authorization, there has to be no treatment for a disease. The grand conspiracy is that the pharmaceutical companies are in cahoots to try to make anybody who takes this stuff, meaning ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, etc., look crazy. I'm going to say that again. The grand conspiracy is that the pharmaceutical companies are in cahoots to try to make anybody who takes this stuff look crazy. But what's crazy is, look how better I got. I got better pretty quick, bitch. Unquote Joe Rogan. Rogan then had a chance to confront someone from the network when Dr. Sanjay Gupta went on his podcast to, I guess, because thinking, I'm much smarter than Joe Rogan, so I can kind of do damage control here for the pharmaceutical companies and the lackeys at CNN who've lied about this. And Rogan made him look ridiculous. You can look that stuff up for yourself if you want. Rogan. They lied and they said I was taking horse dewormer, Rogan said to Gupta. When Gupta starts trying to change the subject, Rogan eventually backs him into the corner and says, if you've got a human pill, it shouldn't be called that. Gupta is forced to concede. Right, exactly. In other words, if a doctor prescribes it for you in a human dosage, don't run around calling it horse dewormer. That's a lie. That's disingenuous. That's a lie with an intent to deceive. You're trying to convince people that this stuff doesn't work. Why are you doing that? And of course, he just laid out why he's trying to do that, because they don't want you to think there's some kind of treatment for this disease. Rogan then asked Gupta, does it bother you that the news network you work for just out and out lied? They outright lied about me taking horse dewormer? And then Gupta goes, they shouldn't have said that. So, he goes on there and he has to basically admit that he can't defend CNN's lies. And he goes on here where these are a number of other outlets here that talk about the Joe Rogan ivermectin horse dewormer controversy. Here's NBC News. Joe Rogan says he has COVID, took widely discredited drug ivermectin. That's NBC News. Here's the Hollywood Reporter. Joe Rogan says he tested positive for COVID-19, takes unproven horse dewormer. The Guardian, that's a leftist British rag. U.S. podcast star Joe Rogan taking deworming drug for ivermectin for COVID. CBS News, I got COVID. Joe Rogan says he's using ivermectin, an unproven anti-parasite drug for treatment. And then the topper is the tweet that comes out. I'm not sure here if this came out time-wise directly in conjunction with the Rogan controversy, but from the U.S. FDA saying, you are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, you all stop it. You all? I get you all from my United States government? That's what I get? But at any rate, the point is, they're lying to you. It's a ridiculous lie. You don't take ivermectin. And then it goes on here where the article that they've written there says, why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. Using the drug ivermectin to treat COVID-19 can be dangerous and even lethal. The FDA has not approved the drug for that purpose. Let me read that again. This is in the tweet that came out in 2021 from the FDA. The FDA has not approved the drug for that purpose. Well, they just came out in court and said, yes, it is approved for that purpose. So apparently they changed their mind. Shazam. Go figure. And the tweet, he goes on, the tweet, as it reads above, makes it seem as the FDA only knew about ivermectin, the veterinarian medicine, and not the human dosage. For a drug that's been around for decades and administered to humans billions of times, this simply cannot be the truth. Absolutely. The misinformation goes beyond gross negligence, clearly moves into malice, in my opinion as well. At the time, Dr. Pierre Corey, that's a man who wants to use ivermectin, who thinks it does work, or is certainly worth discussing and exploring whether or not it works. He responded to the FDA tweet, y'all stop it, and said it best, quote, this adds to the incredibly sad and injurious actions taken by health agencies against U.S. citizens. I hope for a historic reckoning someday. Yeah, you and me both, buddy. As an expert on ivermectin and COVID, if interested in becoming an educated citizen, I offer a short evidence summary. And that's what Corey said. Corey and others throughout the pandemic who advocated for ivermectin were routinely shunned as conspiracy theorists and kooks. People who pointed out that the drug may have been able to save hundreds of thousands of lives as real-world usage in India was proving to us in real time were disregarded and ridiculed. No one's ever explained here in this country why India did not have bodies stacked to the heavens, considering their, how do I want to describe this? Their health system is not as advanced as ours. They have 3 times the population as ours. This COVID should have just massacred people over there. They should have had bodies everywhere, and they didn't. Why? That one's never really been explained, I would argue, because they were using some of these cheap drugs like hydrochloroquine and ivermectin that we were forbidden for even discussing. So, there's that. Many of us noted during the course of the pandemic that ivermectin's Many of us noted during the course of the pandemic that ivermectin's efficacy was being ignored because it would have stopped Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines in their tracks. They couldn't have sold the vaccines under the emergency use authorization if there were other efficacious medicines available. And if Pfizer and Moderna were stopped in their tracks, how could there be the giant sucking sound of billions of dollars in treasury cash making their way into the pharmaceutical industry have taken place? So I'm just reading to you because I'm unfamiliar with the emergency use authorization and what that means. That certainly it seems like things that did happen, this could be an explanation. In other words, if there's no drug to treat a disease, then you could probably just cut all kind of corners in developing a vaccine and make billions, which is what happened. Let's go on here. Those of us who followed the obvious money trail and pointed out what can only be described as the glaringly obvious were ignored and ridiculed. In fact, many of us were banned from our social media accounts. And the grand conspiracy narrative at the time, as Joe Rogan correctly referred to it in September 21, was, quote, one speculation involves the EUA. The EUA, that's Emergency Use Authorization, for the vaccines. In order for there to be EUA, Emergency Use Authorization, there has to be no treatment for a disease. Because there is this treatment, there's a lot of pushback against potential treatments and pretending they don't work, or they're conspiracy theories. That's the grand conspiracy. Now, as anybody that's got 2 brain cells to rub together know that pretty much any kind of conspiracy theory ultimately in 5 years is proven, if not sooner, to be true. It's happened again and again and again and again. So, this is in 21, they're talking about a grand conspiracy theory. I think we could almost just mark this one off as another true conspiracy that has happened. That the pharmaceutical companies are all in cahoots and trying to make anybody that takes this stuff look crazy. And then today, of course, it doesn't look that crazy. The U.S. top COVID experts during the pandemic cashed in to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars during the pandemic, even when they're recommending measures that included lockdowns. Records have been unveiled that Dr. Francis Collins, previously the NIH director, and our favorite here in the barn, Dr. Anthony Fauci, former NIAID director, made substantial profits from royalty checks during the COVID pandemic. These documents prove that the former leaders of the NIH and the NIAID benefit financially from the COVID pandemic. There, I'm not 100% sure what they made and how much. In other words, my understanding of government, because I used to work in the government, was you don't get paid by the private industry. That your check comes from Uncle Sam. I'm not getting royalty checks from the regulated industry, the regulated drug industry. Why would they be paying me? but I think this may happen somehow. You know, not sure on that. It seems ridiculous. It's like, why is this guy who works for the government getting money from the private industry? That doesn't make any sense. But I think it does happen. And okay, so then he sums up. Now these are things that he concludes about ivermectin. 1, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca wanted to sell their experimental vaccines in absence of long-term safety data. They couldn't do it under the emergency use authorization if ivermectin and other early treatments were found to have efficacy, if they worked. Ergo, the media, sponsored by these same pharma companies, launched a malicious misinformation campaign in the face of demonstrable proof of both efficacy and safety for ivermectin. Don't forget the hand of the government in this, of course. I'm adding this on here. That the government, which for the most part was controlled by the Democrats, Donald Trump complicit in this in certainly some fashion, although he was only involved in this up until, say, the end of 20, and then the Democrats took over. And the Democrats right down the line were pushing this from the very beginning. How can you take ivermectin? That's not allowed. That's unproven. You can't take hydrochloroquine. That's dangerous. You can't do that. You just got to sit there and wait until we get this magical vaccine, which will save all your problems. And you might have to wait a year. So just sit there in your house and we'll shut the economy down. Don't worry, that'll have no repercussions down the road. Trust us, trust us. 2 weeks to stop the spread. Oh, this is your new normal. They lied, they lied, they lied, they lied, they lied. The campaign knowingly mislabeled a drug with decades-long history of success in humans as horse medicine. As this took place, additional rigged clinical studies, many of which with significant conflicts, tried to paint a picture of ivermectin not being efficacious through dishonest means. And then he's got a link there to show you the receipts of these studies that lie about the whether or not ivermectin works. From there, the government worked with social media to stifle and censor anyone who raised critical questions and told the inconvenient truth in the midst of the pandemic. Finally, after all the damage was done and the vaccine grift ended, the FDA casually and cavalierly admitted in the United States court that doctors, quote, do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID, unquote. So that's the piece. And as I said, this may be running a little long, but I find most of this is pretty obvious. I mean, some of that stuff you're going to have to look up on your own and determine whether QTR's Fringe finance, if the receipts he has on the efficacy, he keeps using that word and I have trouble pronouncing it, which he wouldn't. Whether or not it works is kind of on your own, but I think it's pretty obvious at this juncture. Ivermectin worked then, works now, will always work on COVID. So I don't think that's a hard lift. A fact that we are certain of is that at this juncture, the FDA seems to think that it works on COVID because they've admitted it. They just said it in court that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. Well, that certainly seems to fly in the face of this tweet they put out there in 21 saying why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. Using it can be dangerous and even lethal. We have not approved this drug for this purpose. Now, I would argue, is that because they're stupid and incompetent? In other words, you have two basic things that could be true here. That in 21, they did not realize that ivermectin was working, and that's why they didn't approve it. Or they've just discovered here in the interim between 21 and now that, oh, it does work. Okay, I guess you can go ahead and use it. As he points out, that's ludicrous. That's ridiculous. It's like this is after the pandemic's been going for over a year, that this tweet came out about, stop it, y'all, it's horse dewormer, you can't take that. I mean, how can one of the biggest medical organizations in the world, probably one of the best funded, that has the best scientists, how could you not figure that out for yourself, that ivermectin works? That's ridiculous. I don't buy the argument that the FDA is incompetent. I buy the argument that they're malicious. In other words, they knew goddamn well that ivermectin worked, and they didn't want you taking it. They did not want you taking it, because if you didn't take it, then you felt forced to take these vaccines, of which to use Mr. QTR's word, the efficacy of these vaccines is very questionable. I know somebody right now that's got COVID, and they've had, 3 shots. They had, I guess, Pfizer 1, Pfizer 2, and then they ended up with a booster shot. And they got COVID anyway, just now. Shazam, that's weird. So go figure. The efficacy of these vaccines is very questionable, particularly in people that had no way, or no, young people don't get COVID. And if they do get it, it damages them hardly at all. That was pretty well proven early on. But the government, of course, with the backing of Big Pharma, is trying to force everybody to take these goddamn vaccines. They've done a great job of doing it. I don't know how many young people have died needlessly because they took these vaccines they didn't need. It's malicious. It's evil what these people have done. Just flat evil. The media, evil. These Democrats in power, lying to you about a drug that could have helped us, evil. Just evil. It's just horrifying. And it frustrates me to no end that these outlets that just lied to you about ivermectin continue to just operate blithely and everybody just listens to them. They're discredited. They're liars. They have no credibility whatsoever. And that includes you bastards at YouTube. You know, you took one of my videos down so many years ago, and you never say why. You know, I think it was because I expressed the opinion that, you know, when those booster shots come around, I don't think I'm going to take one. And I guess that was right out. So, you know, they send you the little message there. They give you a tiny little box and say, here's the complaint form, write legibly. And then they never answer you. They just say denied, and you're suspended for a week, and they take your content down, and they never tell you why. Yeah, when I say that Google is a liar, well, that's not a platform. They don't publish content, but they do. In other words, their algorithms, their search engines tell you what to read. In other words, if you type in there, did the government lie to me about ivermectin? It's not going to bring this video up. It's not going to bring QTR's Fringe Finance's article up. It's going to bring you up a whole bunch of mealy-mouthed crap from CNN about, oh, it's only been recently that ivermectin has been determined to be possibly a useful drug that may be prescribed in some cases. It's still questionable. The use could go either way. Many people believe it works, but that's totally unproven. You know, it'll bring up some kind of mealy-mouthed bullshit from the same people that lied to you for years, telling you it was dangerous, even lethal, including the FDA. That's Google. They're the ones that censor content. They're the ones that took my video down, and they're the ones that order through their Marxist algorithms anything that might be the truth and shove that to the bottom and put the government lies and the corporation lies to the top. I find it odd that here in this article, Bernie Sanders is referenced. In other words, he's pointing out, I skipped over that part for brevity, but Sanders points out in a letter that the Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson, the big pharma people, their executives made millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions based on this pandemic. Now, Bernie's mad that they made millions. He wants the millions to be made by the government. He's not mad about the millions, he's mad about who made them. We should be mad that they were made at all. In other words, we could have gone down to the corner pharmacist and said, well, how about a bottle of ivermectin so I can just, maybe self-treat a little bit in case I don't feel well with this virus, and we'll keep the economy running and everything will be cool. Oh no! Oh my God, no. We couldn't do that because, had we done that, well, then the people, the elites, the billionaires couldn't have seized total control of this country and put it in a chokehold like it is now. Oh, this is so aggravating because people died over these lies. They died. It's not up for debate. They died. The people that pushed these lies killed people. And it really upsets me that I see in polite society, I go to a bar, they've got CNN on. I go to someone's home, they've got CNN on. They've got MSNBC on. You want to punch them in the face. It's like and I figure they're just ignorant. Some of them are malicious. Some of these people that watch these channels are malicious. They're evil too. Some are just ignorant. It's like, you've been lied to. Don't you care? Don't you give a shit? You've been lied to. People died because of these lies. So, anyway, I'm just trying to show you, just trying to enlighten you. Why is the government now saying that it's okay to prescribe ivermectin? Ask yourself that question. Does that explanation make sense? Oh yeah. Yeah, we just figured out that it's safe now, some 3.5 years into the pandemic. We just figured it out now. Or they knew it all along and were lying about it all along. As other countries, the United States makes up what, 2% of the world? Other countries were successfully using this shit in the pandemic successfully with efficacy. And we, of course, didn't want that. So we just, that doesn't happen. The conditions are different here than they are in India. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Exasperating, just completely exasperating. And this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as that pandemic bullshit went. That they want us to just forget about that. Joe Biden wants us just to forget that all happened. Why is gas costing $4 a gallon now? Why is ground beef cost $5 a pound? Why are my expenses, according to some numbers I saw there, upwards of 10 grand more a year for a family? Well, because you shut the goddamn economy down for 2 years, you bastards. That's why, because all that shit runs downhill. You can't shut the world down for 2 years without severe repercussions. I told you that at the time. Of course, no one listens to me. And now we're dealing with it, But hey, go listen to, what is it, Rich Men North of Richmond? Go dig that up if you want to protest. That'll be taken off the internet soon. Just some country guy just basically telling me how bad things are. It's like, I know, dude. Come up here in the barn and sing. We'll sing together. Well, I'll say, how about this? You sing and I'll say, doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. Maybe that. But yeah, go look up Rich Men North of Richmond. That's a protest song. There'll be more. There'll be more. I'm just angry right now. Just really frustrated. This article really teed me off. Things I had already known, and I thought, we got to talk about this. So I'm Eric Arnold. I believe in free speech. I don't know how much longer we'll have free speech. I hope YouTube takes this episode down, but I don't know they will, because now they've admitted, ivermectin, everyone knew that, Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. So I believe in free speech, and we'll talk again.